On June 24th, 1969, 3 men were returning from humanity's first steps on the surface of the moon. The world listened anxiously and watched as the 3 astronauts of Apollo 11 hurtled towards Earth. 2,400 sailors, a hand-picked recovery team, and the President of the United States nervously scanned the skies above the Pacific Ocean, 900 miles southwest of Hawaii.
And then I saw the command module streak through the atmosphere like a meteor, come right through this huge hole in the clouds.
At last, the module and the men from the moon splashed into the Pacific.
And then it was all business. It was checklist, procedure 1, 2, 3, and on.
The recovery team sprang into action.
Basically, we had rehearsed everything.
The astronauts' lives and their precious cargo from the moon depended on the skills of very young men.
Here's a 19-year-old kid. If he screws up, we lose the moon rocks.
But the moon rocks were not lost, and neither were the astronauts. Young sailors brought them safely to the deck of the USS Hornet and into legend.
They were so proud of being able to pick up 3 people, invaders from the moon, you might say, okay? And what they really put together was just an impeccable performance.
On that historic day, members of the recovery team posed for a snapshot in front of the command module and then went their separate ways. Exactly 30 years later, to the day, they've reunited to pose for another picture.
Charlie Free!
It's the first time they've seen each other in 3 decades.
Man, that's a long time, huh?
Your head.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
And it's the first time they've all gathered to tell their stories about a day the world will never forget. Oh, this is the USS Hornet, the aircraft carrier that welcomed the astronauts back to Earth. Well, these days it's retired and docked permanently here in Alameda. It's open to the public 7 days a week. But on the 30th anniversary of the astronauts' return, we in the Backroads crew were invited to go behind the scenes to hear fascinating stories, some of them never before told in public. The reunion begins early in the morning as the honored guests meet along the dock next to the Hornet.
Edward Nixon.
Hi.
Nixon's brother.
Pleasure to
Clancy
meet you, sir.
Halliburton, and UDT.
Edward Nixon is here to represent his late brother, President Richard Nixon, who greeted the astronauts on the Hornet 30 years before.
When we come back aboard a great lady like the Hornet, it just makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck.
Retired Admiral Carl Seiberlich was the captain of the Hornet and commander of the mission that recovered the astronauts, including Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon.
Buzz, do you know Doug McConnell by any chance?
Nope.
Doug,
Buzz,
this is Dr.
Hi.
Buzz Aldrin.
Nice to meet you,
Doug
Buzz.
is the Bay Area Backroads and
Bay Area
is
Backroads.
Bay Area Backroads and has done.
Buzz may not recognize our show, but of course everyone recognizes him,
I never had a chance to personally thank you for my silver Snoopy.
including Clancy Hadlberg. Clancy was the first person to open the space capsule and welcome the astronauts back home.
It was the highest sea states that we had ever practiced in, let alone actually do a recovery.
A storm was brewing in the South Pacific, creating rough 7- and 8-foot waves, and Clancy remembers being hit by what he calls the wave of the day.
And I said, this is it. When I turn over, there's nobody in this raft but me.
The astronauts will be gone.
They'll be gone. But that wasn't the case, you know. And that was the
A
end of it.
little moment of subtle panic.
Yes, because I did not have a procedure for that.
Clancy still recalls his procedures to the letter.
I had to decontaminate the command module, the flotation collar, the raft, and then take my big suit off.
Procedures which included the initial decontamination of the astronauts, of moon germs they might have brought back. The decontamination suits are not easy to talk through.
Did you talk to them as they came out?
Well, this is what I'm trying to find out today, because the first person out was Buzz Aldrin. So he says something that sounds like, well, you know, I'd been prepared to say something like, welcome back, but as a Navy-trained communicator, you know, you repeat back an undiscernible message. So I said, instead. I mean, I can't believe I did that. So today, you know, I wanted to get Buzz aside and say, Buzz, what the heck did we say out there?
Everybody involved in the recovery, including frogman Terry Muhlenbach, says they were so focused on doing the job right,
it was just another job, another work day.
they didn't think much about the historical significance of the day.
And I don't think until later, 30 years later, that I really appreciated how monumental it was.
For Admiral Carl Seiberlich, the threat of moon germs, which turned out not to exist, guided his every move.
The thing that drove everything that I did in positioning, handling, assignment of personnel with the danger of the moon germs to the ship and the crew, which now are not even discussed.
Even Moonwalker Buzz was focused on just one more stroll.
Whatever big picture thoughts might have been drifting through our minds, we were, I think, wise enough to know that if you tripped on the red carpet, all those wonderful thoughts were meaningless in the eyes of the watching public.
But Buzz's walk and the entire recovery were flawless, and the astronauts entered an Airstream trailer to protect the public and the president from the feared moon germs.
Neil, Buzz, and Mike, I want you to know that I think I'm the luckiest man in the world.
So I said, Mr. President, if you go down and shake hands with the astronauts and you get contaminated with the moon germs, I'm in a world of trouble.
Admiral Seiberlich's mind was still on the recovery, even when the Hornet and their famous passengers were met by a celebration as they docked in Honolulu.
I thought this would be a dumb thing to drop these guys on the pier at Pearl Harbor, but it worked out okay.
Though they'd been to the moon, it took their return to Earth and the tumultuous public welcome they received to reveal to the astronauts the true importance of their journey.
And that's when I looked at Neil and I said, look at that, we missed the whole thing. Meaning that the importance, the significance was back here. That's where the action was. The human response, the human sense of involvement and participation. And when you look at it, that's the most important part.
The day of the reunion of the Apollo 11 recovery team and the fellow they plucked from the sea, thousands of people came aboard the USS Hornet to hear old stories.
The first words that were spoken that historic day are still.
They came to greet the man from the moon. And they came to see what it must have been like to serve on the Hornet during its historic rendezvous.
Could you imagine being one of the sailors on board this ship 30 years ago?
It'd be awesome. I'd love to be one of those people on the helicopter that helped rescue him.
The USS Hornet is now docked permanently in Alameda and is open to the public every day. Well, I've personally come back many times. I'm fascinated by the stories this old ship has to tell, by its capacity to fire the imagination, and by its ability to establish relationships across barriers of time and space. Well, that even happened to me on the day of the reunion. I was stunned to see Terry Muhlenbach here. We'd worked together in Alaska 20 years ago. I was even more amazed to find out that he'd been a frogman on the Apollo 11 recovery team, having just returned from a top-secret tour in Vietnam.
And I was 23 years old at the time, so now everything seems a lot smaller, less intimidating.
Terry had never talked about his dangerous exploits before, keeping his experiences and feelings to himself, until this reunion, when he finally let his emotions show. It was nice getting to know him better.
Do you want to be an astronaut, Kobe?
Yeah.
And it was nice to see imaginations fired up on board the Hornet, with embers being stirred by Buzz himself.
Space tourism begins with rethinking where we are today. I envision an opportunity for everyone here, or at least our children, to visit space personally.
Buzz has plans for a space liner with seats for more than 100 people, and it appears he has passengers standing by.
Do you think at some point that you want your daughter to go to the moon or to Mars?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Finally, Buzz left the old ship with promises to return. Events like this one are held periodically on the Hornet to help us all learn about our past and think about our future.
And you're standing right on the steps where man first walked when they came back from the moon. And that's an achievement that hasn't been equaled since.
And volunteers are always on board to help interpret the Hornet's proud military history from World War II to Vietnam. And the Hornet's ties to the moon are also on display in a museum that tells the whole story, from space capsule to Airstream trailer.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
For those of us old enough to remember the landing on the moon and the safe return home, a pilgrimage to the Hornet is a chance to relive a fleeting moment when our conflicts gave way to our dreams. To those born after we touched the moon, the Hornet provides a chance to dream again.
You gonna let him go to the moon, do you think, sometime?
Oh, I think he's going to go. What's the next one? Mars. 14 years.